20 EU leaders met today to discuss all things Ukraine, a day after President Zelensky announced 31,000 soldiers have died in the war. But Rishi Sunak didn't show up. Instead, he sent Defence Secretary David Cameron, who arrived in Paris to call for an increase in European defence output to help strengthen Ukraine's defence. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron said he hoped the meeting would reaffirm the EU's unity as well as their determination to defeat Russia's war of aggression. talkTV's war correspondent Tom Mutch joins us live from Kyiv. Tom, what's the morale like amongst the Ukrainians now that Zelensky has released a death count for the first time? That's quite a big number, isn't it?
31,000 is indeed a big number. However, I would unfortunately point you to a US estimate from towards the end of last year, which suggested that it was more than double that.
Really?
Quite honestly, the numbers could be up to 80 or 90,000 killed in action. Now, the fact that the Russians have probably lost even more than that, up to 150 or 200,000, is really neither here nor there for them, as the Russians seem to not value the lives of their troops one bit at all. We have seen them constantly throw troops in meat waves into the grinder in places like Bakhmut and Avdiivka. However, they do slowly and surely seem to be taking more territory in the east. I'd say the mood here at the moment is fairly glum. We've just had the second anniversary. This time last year, there was a sort of giddy optimism in the air. Ukraine had won those sort of glorious victories, first kicking them out of Kyiv, then the unexpected victory in the counteroffensive at Kharkiv, and then that long, slow slog that eventually pushed them out of the southern city of Kherson. However, after last year, which was a very difficult year for Ukraine, where they made no real major gains on the battlefield for quite heavy losses in both troops and Western equipment, people here are in rather a down mood at the moment.
Yeah, and recent sort of events, shall we say, in Moscow have not exactly given us the impression that Vladimir Putin is in any mood to stop the war anytime soon. He seems to be sort of acting as if he can do whatever he likes, and he doesn't really fear what the West's reaction is going to be.
Yes, it doesn't just show that he doesn't fear the West's reaction. His idea is basically that Western democracies are fickle and that they're weak, and that eventually they are going to run out of patience and energy to want to keep supporting Ukraine. And in an autocracy, he has a much longer timescale. He doesn't have democratic elections to worry about. So his idea is that I can just keep throwing troops into the meat grinder. We can bump out our industrial production. And eventually we'll have enough troops and enough armaments to just slowly overwhelm Ukraine. And with the $60 billion aid package being stuck in Congress, it looks like he might unfortunately be right about that. Now, what it also shows, however, the killing of Alexei Navalny in particular, is that he isn't really that worried about domestic opposition from within Russia as well. He feels like he can do whatever he wants, not just in the West side, but in the eyes of his own domestic population as well.
Yeah. And in terms of Ukraine's sort of recruitment of soldiers, if you like, we know that Putin is more than happy to conscript and get people to go down and fight in Ukraine as and when they're required. What's the sort of supply of men, young men, like in Ukraine?
So right now there is a big debate over this. Valery Zaluzhny, the previous chief of the Ukrainian armed forces, before he got the sack, he wanted to do a major mobilization that would pull up as many as 500,000 troops. Now, at the moment, the age that men can be forcibly conscripted into the army is 27. There's a proposal currently working its way through Parliament to lower that to 25, but it's very controversial because, quite honestly, Ukraine doesn't have as many young men as Russia does. Russia has about 4 times the population. And so if it wants, and this is the worry that after the elections, if we can call them that, in Russia coming up in a couple of weeks, that after that, Vladimir Putin could order another wave of mobilization. Because to put it honestly, I've spoken to a lot of frontline soldiers recently. I was out on the front lines in the Kharkiv region near Kupiansk last week, and many of the soldiers there, they're exhausted, they're kind of demoralized. Many of them have been on the front line for nearly 2 years with very little rest or rotation. This is a really major problem for Ukraine at the moment.
Absolutely. Tom, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Tom Mutch reporting into us there from Kyiv.